March 3rd, 2025, 2:47 p.m. I'm standing on the assembly line at the Subaru of Indiana automotive plant in Lafayette, Indiana, installing dashboard components into Outback models. Same job I've done for 14 years. Same precise movements. Same rhythm. The familiarity is comforting, until my supervisor's hand touches my shoulder. "Danny, we need you in the conference room. Now." The way he said it, flat, emotionless. That's how I knew. You work in manufacturing long enough, you learn to read those tones. That's the voice they use when they're about to destroy your life. Conference room B. 18 of us crammed inside. Plant manager at the front. HR representatives flanking him like executioners. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Effective April 1st, this facility will reduce production of Outback models destined for Canadian export by 74%. We're implementing immediate workforce reductions. If your name appears on this list, my name was fourth from the top. Daniel Morrison, age 46. Assembly line technician. Employment terminated. 14 years. Gone. Just like that. But here's the part that made my blood boil. They weren't shutting down production. They were just shipping fewer cars to Canada. Because Subaru found it cheaper to build Outbacks in Japan, load them on ships, and sail them 6,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean than to drive them 500 miles north from Indiana. Think about that for a second. Really think about it. Ocean freight for 6,000 miles is now more economical than trucking 500 miles. That's not economics. That's insanity. That's what happens when your president decides to play chicken with the global economy and loses. My name is Danny Morrison. I'm 46 years old. I've worked in automotive manufacturing my entire adult life. And this is the story of how Trump's tariff war didn't just cost me my job, it obliterated everything I'd built, everything I believed in, and forced me to make a choice I never thought I'd face: stay in America and starve, or abandon my country for survival. Let me take you back to when life made sense. February 2025, just 1 month before everything imploded. I started at Subaru, Indiana in 2011, right when they were ramping up Outback production. Good job. Union benefits, $28.50 an hour base pay, plus overtime. In a good year, I cleared $67,000. That's solid middle-class money in Indiana. Not rich, but comfortable. Secure. My wife Rachel worked as a dental hygienist, $42,000 annually. Together, we were pulling in about $109,000. We had a nice 3-bedroom house in West Lafayette. 2 cars, both Subarus, naturally, employee discount. Our son Jake was in his senior year of high school, planning to study engineering at Purdue. Our daughter Mia was 13, obsessed with soccer and TikTok. We were living the dream. The actual, legitimate American dream. Monthly finances looked healthy. Mortgage, $1,680. Car payments, $620. Utilities, $340. Groceries, $750. Insurance, all types, $580. Jake's college fund contribution, $500. Mia's activities, $220. Retirement savings, $800. Miscellaneous, $510. Total, $6,000 monthly expenses. Combined income after taxes, $7,100. Cushion, $1,100. We had $28,000 in savings. Retirement accounts totaling $186,000. Credit score of 731. No red flags. No warnings. Everything by the book. I remember having a conversation with Rachel in early February. We were planning a family trip to Toronto for spring break. Jake had never been to Canada, wanted to see Niagara Falls before college. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" Rachel said. "Better than okay," I replied. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." That conversation haunts me now, because 3 weeks later, Trump's 25% tariff policy turned exactly where we're supposed to be into barely surviving. January 20th, 2025. Trump's second inauguration. One of his first executive actions: massive across-the-board tariffs. 25% on imported steel. 25% on aluminum. 25% on automotive components from certain countries. Additional tariffs on goods from nations he deemed trade cheaters. The stated goal? Bring manufacturing back to America. Make American workers great again. The actual result? Economic suicide. See, here's what the politicians don't tell you about tariffs. They're not paid by foreign countries. They're paid by American companies, which means they're paid by American workers, which means they're paid by me. When Trump slapped those tariffs down, the cost of producing a Subaru Outback in Indiana went up by approximately $3,200 per vehicle. Steel more expensive. Aluminum more expensive. Components imported from Japan, even ones we couldn't source domestically, suddenly cost 25% more. But here's the kicker. Canada had a different deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who'd just taken office in February 2025, had negotiated Canada into the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. That gave Canada zero tariff access to Japanese goods. Zero tariffs. So suddenly, the math looked like this. Building Outback in Indiana, shipping to Canada. Base production cost, $32,000. Trump tariff impact, plus $3,200. Total, $35,200. Shipping cost to Toronto, $120. Final landed cost, $35,320. Building Outback in Japan, shipping to Canada. Production cost, $29,500. CPTPP tariff, $0. Ocean freight, 6,000 miles, $800. Final landed cost, $30,300. Indiana production was now $5,020 more expensive per vehicle. And we were building 47,000 Outbacks annually for Canadian export. Do the math. $5,020 times 47,000 equals $236 million in additional costs. No company absorbs that. No company can. So Subaru made the only logical choice. Stop building for Canada in America. Start importing from Japan instead. And 318 workers, including me, became redundant. Back in that conference room, the plant manager was still talking. Something about market forces and unfortunate necessity and severance packages. I wasn't listening anymore. I was doing math in my head. Severance. 2 weeks per year of service. I had 14 years. That's 28 weeks of pay. Roughly $35,000 after taxes. Unemployment benefits. Indiana pays up to $390 per week. That's $1,560 monthly. Less than a quarter of my previous income. Rachel's dental hygienist salary, $3,100 monthly after taxes. Total household income starting April, $4,660 monthly. Monthly expenses, $6,000 minimum. Shortfall, $1,340 monthly. With severance, we could last maybe 8 months before complete depletion of savings. Without severance, which would run out in about 6 months, we'd be broke by October. Questions? The plant manager asked. I raised my hand. Yeah, one question. How does shipping a car 6,000 miles across an ocean become cheaper than driving it 500 miles north? Silence. I'll tell you how, I continued, standing up. Because our president decided to wage economic war on the world, and we're the casualties. Not him. Not the politicians in Washington, U.S., the workers he claimed to protect. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're upset. Upset? I'm terminated because ocean freight is cheaper than American labor. That's not being upset. That's recognizing that this country just committed economic suicide. I walked out. Didn't wait for the rest of the meeting. Didn't need to hear about COBRA healthcare options or resume writing workshops. I just needed to go home and tell my wife that the American dream was officially dead. Rachel knew something was wrong the moment I walked through the door at 4 p.m. I'm never home at 4 p.m. Danny? I got laid off. She went pale. Sat down slowly on the couch. What happened? I explained everything. The tariffs, the CPTPP, the math, Canada's zero tariff advantage, the 6,000-mile ocean route being cheaper than 500-mile trucking. This doesn't make any sense, she whispered. It makes perfect sense. Trump's tariffs made American manufacturing uncompetitive. Carney's trade deals made Canada the smart choice. Subaru's doing what any rational company would do, following the money. So what do we do? I pulled out my phone, showed her the calculations I'd been running in my head. With severance and your income, we have maybe 8 months. Then we're broke. House gets foreclosed. Jake can't go to Purdue. We lose everything. Can you find another job? In Lafayette? Maybe. But every automotive supplier here is facing the same tariff costs. Caterpillar's laying off. Wabash National's cutting shifts. Everyone's in the same sinking boat. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then, what about Canada? What about it? You said Canadian manufacturing isn't hit by these tariffs. You said Carney's building trade partnerships that make Canada competitive. What if we moved there? I stared at her. Move to Canada? Leave Indiana? Leave America? What's keeping us here, Danny? A country that just decided your job, your livelihood, your family's security, was worth sacrificing for political theater? A president who claims to support workers while making our labor worthless. Rachel, we can't what? Stay and watch everything we've built collapse? Jake's college fund evaporates? Lose our house? I'm not doing that. I'm not watching my family suffer because politicians in Washington decided to play games with our lives. She pulled out her own phone, started searching. Look. Toronto. Dental hygienist positions starting at 75,000 Canadian dollars. That's about 55,000 US dollars. More than I make here. And look, automotive suppliers, parts manufacturers, assembly plants. They're hiring because production's moving north. We don't know anyone in Canada. We didn't know anyone in Indiana when we moved here from Ohio 15 years ago. We figured it out then. We can figure it out now. I wanted to argue, wanted to say she was being crazy, but every logical counterpoint died before reaching my lips. Because she was right. What was keeping us here? Loyalty to a country that had just demonstrated it felt zero loyalty to us? That night, I couldn't sleep. Spent hours online, researching. And the more I learned, the angrier I got. Subaru wasn't alone. It was a pattern. A tsunami. Honda announced it was reducing U.S. production for Canadian export by 40%, shifting to imports from Japan via CPTPP zero tariff channels. Toyota was redirecting Corolla production from Mississippi to Japan for Canadian markets. Mazda completely canceled plans for a new U.S. assembly plant, instead expanding Canadian import capacity. But it wasn't just Japanese companies. Ford was moving F-150 production for Canadian markets from Dearborn, Michigan to Mexico, because Mexico also had CPTPP access. Even General Motors, the most American automotive company in existence, was reducing U.S. production in favor of CPTPP partner manufacturing. The estimates I found were staggering. 37,000 American automotive jobs would be eliminated by end of 2025. Not because companies were failing, because American labor had been priced out of competitiveness by our own government's policies. Meanwhile, Canada was booming. Carney's strategy was working. By maintaining stable, predictable, rules-based trade relationships, especially through CPTPP, Canada had become the most attractive North American manufacturing hub. Articles talked about Carney's triumph, and Canada's manufacturing renaissance. Canadian unemployment was dropping. Wages were rising. Companies were investing. And America? We were bleeding jobs, watching manufacturing flee, and our president was tweeting about how tariffs were making America strong again. I found a quote from an industry analyst that stuck with me. Trump's tariffs were supposed to punish China and protect American workers. Instead, they've made American production economically suicidal, while countries like Canada leverage smart trade policy to become the real winners. American workers are paying for Washington's economic illiteracy. My last day at Subaru was April 1st. Appropriate date for a joke this cruel. They gave me a severance check, a handshake, and a pamphlet about career transition services. 14 years reduced to a folder of paperwork. I drove home in my 2019 Subaru Outback, built in the Indiana plant, back when that meant something, and found Rachel waiting with a laptop open. I applied to 12 dental positions in Toronto and surrounding areas, she said. Got 3 responses already. 2 want video interviews next week. Rachel, I also found this. She turned the laptop toward me. Job listing. Automotive manufacturing technician, Tier 1 supplier in Cambridge, Ontario. CAD $32 per hour, full benefits, immediate start for qualified candidates. That's $23.50 USD, I said. That's less than I was making. Cost of living is comparable. Healthcare is government provided, so we save $580 monthly on insurance. And Danny, here's the important part. This job has a future. It's not dependent on unpredictable American tariff policy. It's not vulnerable to Trump's next impulsive trade war. It's stable. Stable. That word hit me hard. When had stable become a luxury? When had knowing your job will exist next year become something Americans couldn't count on? What about Jake's college? I asked. He got accepted to University of Toronto. Engineering program. Tuition for permanent residents is 14,000 Canadian dollars annually, about 10,000 US dollars, less than Purdue. And if we establish residency, he'd eventually qualify for even lower rates. Permanent residency. You're talking about permanently moving to Canada. I'm talking about surviving, Danny. I'm talking about our kids having futures. I'm talking about not losing everything because American politicians treat workers like expendable pawns. She wasn't wrong. But the weight of it, leaving America, abandoning the country I'd worked for my entire life, felt like betrayal. My dad was a UAW member, I said quietly. Worked for GM for 37 years. He believed in American manufacturing. Believed if you worked hard and played by the rules, America would take care of you. And where did that belief get him? Pension cut by 40% when GM went bankrupt. Healthcare benefits slashed. The social contract is broken, Danny. America doesn't take care of its workers anymore. It sacrifices them for political points. By mid-May, we'd made the decision. We were moving to Canada. Rachel landed a job at a dental clinic in Mississauga, suburb of Toronto. CAD $76,000 annually, full benefits, start date July 1st. I got an offer from an automotive supplier in Cambridge. They manufactured brake systems for Honda, Toyota, and, ironically, Subaru. CAD $32.50 per hour, with overtime typically available. That put me around 70,000 Canadian dollars annually, or about 51,500 US dollars. Less than Indiana, but more secure. Jake got accepted to U of T's engineering program. Mia was excited about moving to a new country. At 13, it was an adventure, not a tragedy. We listed our house. Got an offer within 2 weeks. Market was still okay in Lafayette, though I suspected it wouldn't last once the automotive job losses really hit. I called my dad to tell him. That conversation broke my heart. You're moving to Canada? His voice was flat, disappointed. Dad, I don't have a choice. My job's gone. The industry's collapsing here. Canada's where the work is. We didn't run to Canada during hard times. We fought. We organized. Dad, this isn't the 1970s. There's no union fight to win here. The math doesn't work. American production costs $5,000 more per vehicle because of tariffs. No amount of organizing changes that equation. So you're just giving up on America? America gave up on me first. Silence. Then, your grandfather fought in World War II for this country. And I worked 14 years in a factory building cars for this country. And this country decided I was worth less than ocean freight. I'm not giving up on America, Dad. America gave up on its workers. We barely spoke after that. He couldn't understand. His generation's experience, where American manufacturing was untouchable, where unions had power, where the social contract was real. That world doesn't exist anymore. June 28, 2025. We packed everything we owned into a moving truck, said goodbye to our neighbors, locked the door on our West Lafayette house for the last time, and we drove north. Interstate 65 to 90 east, through Michigan, into Canada at the Detroit-Windsor border crossing. The Canadian border officer checked our work permits, temporary residence documents, asked about the purpose of our move. Employment, I said. Manufacturing job in Cambridge. Welcome to Canada, she said, handing back our passports. Good luck with the new job. No judgment, no politics, just professionalism. As we drove away from the border crossing, into Windsor and toward Toronto, I looked back once. Behind us was America. The country I was born in. The country I'd worked for. The country that had decided I wasn't worth protecting. Ahead was Canada. Unknown. Foreign. But offering what America couldn't anymore. Stability, predictable policy, and a government that understood how trade actually works. You okay? Rachel asked. No, I said honestly, but we will be. We're 3 months into our Canadian life now as I write this in September 2025. Here's what I've learned. The job is good, demanding, but fair. The company's expanding, hiring, investing, building new lines, because they serve a market that isn't crippled by insane tariff policies. Rachel loves her clinic. Better work-life balance, better support staff, and not having to worry about health insurance tied to employment is genuinely life-changing. Jake started at U of T. Thriving, making friends, already involved in a solar car engineering project. Mia joined a soccer team, has a Canadian accent forming already, which is hilarious and endearing. But I'm not going to pretend it's all perfect. I miss America. Miss the familiarity. Miss being able to drive 2 hours and visit my dad. Now it's 8 hours. Miss knowing all the cultural references and understanding every policy discussion. And I'm angry. Angry that I was forced to make this choice. Angry that American workers were sacrificed for political theater. Angry that Trump's America First policies actually meant America alone and economically crippled. The numbers keep getting worse back home. By August 2025, 43,000 automotive jobs lost in the U.S. due to tariff-related production shifts. Subaru of Indiana announced additional layoffs. 500 more workers by year-end. Honda in Ohio, cutting 2 full shifts. Ford Dearborn eliminating 1,200 positions. Meanwhile, Canada's automotive sector added 12,000 jobs in the same period. Cambridge, Ontario, where I work, is booming. New suppliers opening. Expansion projects everywhere. Mark Carney's strategy, stable trade partnerships, CPTPP leverage, predictable business environment, is working exactly as designed. Canada positioned itself as the reliable North American manufacturing hub, while America imploded into policy chaos. And the U.S.? Trump keeps tweeting about winning, while American workers flee to Canada, Mexico, anywhere with sane trade policy. People ask me, do you regret leaving America? I don't know how to answer that, because it's the wrong question. The right question is, why did America make it impossible to stay? I didn't want to leave. I wanted to keep building Subaru Outbacks in Indiana. Wanted Jake to go to Purdue. Wanted to retire with my UAW pension after 30 years. Wanted the American dream my father's generation promised me. But that dream doesn't exist anymore. It died somewhere between corporate lobbying, political grandstanding, and policy decisions made by people who've never spent a single day on a factory floor. Trump's tariffs were supposed to protect American workers. Instead, they made American labor economically impossible. They handed Canada and every other CPTPP country a competitive advantage we can't overcome. And now I'm here, a Canadian permanent resident, building brake systems for cars that might have been built in Indiana if America hadn't shot itself in the foot. It's October now. Fall colors are spectacular in Ontario. Forgot how beautiful Canadian autumns are. Got a message from a former coworker yesterday. Marcus. Worked next to me on the line for 8 years. Danny, man, it's bad here. They laid off another 140 last week. Everyone's scrambling. Half the guys are working Uber. The other half are looking at Canada. Was it hard? The move? I thought about that for a long time before responding. The move wasn't hard, I typed back. Living in a country that valued my labor so little it became worth less than shipping costs. That was hard. Everything after that has just been logistics. He didn't respond. But 3 days later, I saw his LinkedIn update. Exploring opportunities in Canadian automotive manufacturing. We're not refugees. We're economic migrants. Forced to leave our own country not by violence or persecution, but by policy incompetence and political theater. And we're not coming back. Not while Trump's in office. Not while American policy prioritizes tariffs over workers. Not while Canada offers what America won't: stability, rationality, and a future. This is my life now. Canadian permanent resident, former American worker, living proof that Trump's America First policies actually mean America loses. I'm 46 years old. I built Subarus in Indiana for 14 years. Now I build brake systems in Ontario. And somewhere in Tokyo, Subaru executives are shipping Outbacks 6,000 miles across the Pacific to Canada, because that's cheaper than driving them 500 miles from where I used to work. If that doesn't tell you everything about America's trade policy failure, nothing will.